So hi there, thanks for joining us today. I'm Lauren Parsons from Lauren Parsons Wellbeing Specialists, and today I've got a really special guest with me today to share about wellbeing. So welcome to Aaron Jarden. How are you going, Aaron?
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, and just so you know, Aaron's actually not so well at the moment. He's got a cold, so you may hear that in his voice, and he just wanted to apologise in advance if he has to cough. So we'll hopefully send him our well wishes that you recover really soon, Aaron. But Aaron is the Senior Lecturer of Psychology at AUT and is a wellbeing researcher. So he's done lots of amazing things around health and wellbeing. And so today I just wanted to share this interview with you so that we can together help you boost your health and happiness. So I wanted to, Aaron, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your background and why it is that you do what you do.
Well, I think just to keep that story relatively short, I started off as a philosopher in ethics, studying ethical theory and applied ethics. And ethics is all about the good life, or what makes a good life. And so I started thinking about well-being really early on. And I sort of moved from philosophy into IT for a little while, and then from IT into psychology. And in psychology, I trained as a clinical psychologist, which is all what's going wrong with you. And about sort of 15 years ago, I switched to positive psychology when it was developing, which is all what's going right with you. So I've had a bit of a pathway which started all thinking about the good life and well-being, and now I'm more into the science of it. Right.
Okay. And tell me about your research. What's currently happening in the research world that you're working on?
Oh, there's a lot. That's one of the cool things about this new area. It's really forging new ground in a number of ways. Things that I'm working on, which are very novel or no one else is working on, is one's this idea of simplifying your life. So I think there's a link between simplification and simplification techniques and approaches and increasing your well-being. So, life coaches have been applying simplification practices for a long time. It's usually to reduce ill-being or to reduce stress and things like that. But I did a review of the literature, and there are only 2 empirical studies on actually the well-being benefits of simplification. So by simplification, I mean stopping doing things and doing less and prioritizing what you're doing in regards to what's important to you. So I'm trying to carve out a bit of an area of research and set up some programs around looking at the empirical links between whether simplifying your life in itself improves your well-being, or the other part to this is whether a lot of the positive psychological interventions we have, or techniques to improve people's happiness and well-being, when you ask them why they stop doing them or why they fail, they almost inevitably say life got too busy. So whether simplification or creating space in somebody's life might be a precursor to actually trying some of these techniques, might make them have a larger impact and be more sustainable, so last longer. So that's the other kind of research question to this. So that's just one area that I'm trying to carve out at the moment. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. Another group that I'm getting really keenly involved in is infusing wellbeing into higher education. So field of positive education is doing really well at secondary schools, and we've learned an awful lot. In the field of positive organisations, about how to create flourishing institutions, we've learned a lot. But bringing the 2 fields together with a big, large international collaborative and rolling wellbeing into higher education, or movements also called positive universities, is really exciting as well. So I'm at the forefront of leading a group of people there.
Great. And so you're looking at not just reducing stress, but actually really enhancing wellness and well-being overall.
Yeah, well, it's a combination of both. I wouldn't say we necessarily exclude the idea of reducing the bad. That's all part and parcel of it. So one of the traditional critiques of positive psychology was that it seems to be all about just increasing the positive and ignoring the negative, but really the 2 go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm interested to hear what you said about simplifying your life, because I think that is such a common thing that people say now, how are you? And most people's response is, oh, I'm busy, I'm busy, or I'm so busy. And we do wear it as a bit of a busy badge. I tend to like to say that my life is full of good things, because it is. And I actually do like having lots of things happening. But do you think that people in general have just got too much going on in their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, well, it's obviously a spectrum. Even a too simpler life can be bad for your well-being. I mean, there was a study that was out of by Tim Kasser, I forget which, somewhere in the States anyway, where they basically got people to sit down and just sit with their thoughts for 15 minutes, one group, and then they got another group, and then they gave them the option to have access to an electric shock machine. And they found that more than half the participants would rather give themselves a moderate electric shock than just sit there bored for 15 minutes. So I think this is like, you can simplify, but there's limits to simplification.
Right.
Life
Yeah.
can become overly too simple and too boring to not create enough stimulation, which can also impact your well-being. So it's part of the research agenda here is teasing out where those thresholds are.
Right. So is it kind of like a bell curve, I guess, in terms of, we
Yeah,
need a certain
and
level of stress to get us at peak performance, and if we go past it, we get down into distress and
yeah, somewhat to the idea of eustress, but it's
Mhm.
just, I mean, there'll be individual variations in where these limits are. I know for me, being bored is like my worst nightmare. So, um,
Yeah, great. Yeah, and the brain sees boredom as pain, doesn't it? And so it just wants you to move away from that. Yeah. Okay, so would you be happy to share with us what are some of the things that you do, daily practices perhaps that you use or you recommend people use to improve their well-being?
well, I think the first one's a focus on physical health. So, um, I'm lucky to be involved in a research centre called the Human Potential Centre at AUT, where we run a big research study called the Sovereign New Zealand Wellbeing Index, where we follow 10,000 New Zealanders, and we ask them quite detailed questions about their physical health and their psychological well-being. And what we find in that data is there's a very strong relationship between people that eat well, they move a lot and sleep well, and those people almost inevitably have above average or even very high levels of well-being. And quite the converse as well, people that aren't eating a good diet, aren't getting enough sleep, and are sedentary, so they aren't physically active, they almost inevitably have very low levels of well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So although most of the models to date don't have physical health as part of psychological well-being, or in fact none of them do, um, my message there is really it's really hard to build psychological well-being without good physical health. So in my life, I make sure that I get at least 3 different types of exercise a week. So I go to the gym and do some weights. I go for a swim. I play a weekly game of squash. Obviously not when I'm unwell, but I realise that physical health and getting enough sleep and I control my diet. So I'm a bit of a fan of this new diet called LCHF, or low carbohydrate, high fat diet. But I'm not eating a lot of sugar and a lot of junk food and things like that. So I think the first thing I do for my well-being is focus on my physical health. Then after that, I think there's just a bunch of techniques that I've learned over time about just being in this field. So I know what my strengths are. My PhD was actually on personal values and how they relate to well-being. So I know my values and a sense of meaning and purpose, and I structure my work in that way. So I think all these kind of techniques across the whole field, at one stage or another, I've tried and I've figured out what works for me and what builds my well-being. So I think I know, I think everyone has a slightly different recipe for well-being. Like, for example, I know mindfulness just doesn't do it for me. I'm more of a prospector. So rather than bring my mind into the present, I get more well-being by thinking more about the future. So I think everyone has a slightly different recipe for well-being, and I've kind of slowly worked out over time and effort what works for me.
Great, yeah. And so that's interesting because I think that's so, we're all unique. And so often it is just learning different techniques, isn't it? And people being able to then fit them into their everyday life.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point you raised too, because a lot of the wellbeing strategies we have at the moment, from a research point of view, we'd say a lot of the studies are efficacy studies. So they're very controlled lab setting, particular populations, asking a question, does X impact Y? But in the real world, we call them effectiveness trials. So you take what we know works and then you try and see what happens when it happens in the real world, and we know very, very little about that. So a lot of the techniques and tools and strategies we have in the research literature to improve wellbeing, we really don't know how applicable they are to the real world and the extent to which they need to be adapted to work in the real world. So I think this is kind of a new area, or a new bunch of studies are needed to figure out how we can apply these and make them practical in people's everyday lives. So, for example, how can you do mindfulness on the go? How can you roll out strengths in games? And there's this other idea too about supercharging these interventions. So it's not necessary that you just need to do one at a time, but how can you get some exercise whilst being mindful, whilst connecting with somebody else? If we can combine a lot of these things, the synergistic effects might be even greater.
Yeah, great. I love that because I work on my 5 Live Well principles, and then within them they've each got 6 pillars. But I love what you're saying because it's great when you can think of, okay, I want to be outdoors. I've got to spend time outdoors because I know it's great for my well-being. But actually, could you add in different things that also add to your well-being, like connection, social connection with other people? Could you add in play? So actually choosing and carving out time to head out in the garden for 5 minutes to play with your children, even in winter or even on a chilly day, it's going to have lots and lots of different levels and ways to boost people's well-being. So I guess it's finding out what people's values are, what's important to them, and then being able to carve out time or make that time, prioritize it really, because we all do have time to fit it into their days. Yeah. So
Yeah,
tell me
and
more.
it's interesting that there's no literature on how to make these things applicable in the real world. There's
Mm-hmm.
just nothing. All we hear is case study stories from coaches making these techniques applicable to people's challenges in their daily life. So we know that it can be done. There's nothing to read on it.
Right. And one thing often people ask me is, how do they switch on their motivation, or how do they get motivated? Have you researched into that, or is that something you have an opinion on? Because as you say, they might know something that will help them, but it's actually doing it. So how do people get motivated to start trying something new?
Yeah, well, motivation is just a huge field within psychology as a whole. I think one of the best things you can do is I really like Ken Sheldon's work around self-concordant goal striving. So it's basically this idea of when you're setting goals, just make sure that the goals are in alignment with what's important to you and your values. So if you're setting goals, or you want to become motivated to do something, if that's more in alignment with things that are self-concordant, or in alignment with things that are important to you, you're much more easily motivated to sustain and stick to those kinds of things.
Nice.
So I think that's really important. I think people get a lot of goals imposed on them, and they set a lot of goals without thinking about how they align with what's important to them, perhaps because of either unrealistic ideals or other people's ideals or cultural norms and these sorts of things. But if you've got goals which are you've thought quite clearly about how they tap into your meaning and purpose and values and things like that, then motivation is a lot less of an issue.
Great. Yeah, I like that. So you talked about self-concordant goals, so things that line up with your values essentially. And that's a really key thing, because I think many of us have never really thought about what our values are. And I've been through a process many years ago, which was just amazing what it uncovered for me in terms of what my values are, and when they're being fulfilled, then I feel happy. And even if something challenging comes along, as long as I'm still finding ways to fulfill my values, I'll manage through that. And so that was really interesting. So is what you're saying that if somebody's making a goal but it's not really in line with their actual values, they're going to kind of be fighting an uphill battle? Like, for example, if they've got a goal that someone else has suggested, or they think they should do this thing because their friend is doing it, or so is it being mindful to make sure that your goals are really your own?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. And I know that you recently did a talk on looking at the future of wellbeing. Could you share with us, what do you think is coming up in terms of the field of wellbeing, and what's the future hold?
Well, I think at the moment, the area which I suppose is most carved out is positive psychology. And in that area, it's made great strides in various areas such as positive education, positive neuroscience, rolling wellbeing out into the military, and positive health, national accounts of wellbeing, culture and wellbeing. There's these big areas where it's made great strides. But when I look at seeing some niche areas that haven't yet opened up, I see things like play as being under-realized, slowness, so this idea of slowing down, wellbeing in nature. This is some great meta-analysis. Recent health and wellbeing is almost completely unrealized in the literature. There are other areas like positive parenting and the benefits of a lot of these perceived things, which some people think are negative, like being lazy or experiencing discomfort. I really like this idea of discomfort enabling well-being. So there's a really good TED talk by Robert Biswas-Diener on this, but it's the idea of, if you think of some of the best days of your life, the chances are it'll have a huge amount of discomfort in it. So, and it's so true for me as well. So when I think of one of the best days of my life, it was or a really good day that I had was walking the Tongariro crossing. But I forgot my lunch. I twisted my knee. It was cold. We had all 4 different types of, at one stage it was so windy you could lean into it and just stand up. We got sunburnt. The whole day was just full of discomfort, but it was one of the best days. And I think.
Do you think that's because that helps us, remind us that we're alive?
Yeah, that's part of it. But other days too, like your wedding day, you'll have, stresses of the relatives and the uncomfortable person in your family that, will want to talk about, that loan you never repaid or whatever. I think good days are imbued with discomfort, but this idea that we need to sort of park that and avoid it and disquell it and things like that, it's not really good for wellbeing. So I think there's these other areas which we haven't really played Laziness is another one. Being strategically lazy can be good for you if you're not putting your time and effort into things which you're naturally good at or want to be good at, but saving your energies for things that you are good at and you want to be good at is another idea. But so I think there's a whole bunch of, just to get back to your question, there's a whole bunch of niche areas about to open up. Actually, sex is another one. So in positive psychology, one of the things we do well is measure emotions and focus on emotions, but there's almost no literature from the positive psychology folk about sex and well-being. That's all in the social psychology folk and some of the more traditional studies back in the 80s and 90s. So I think that's just one sort of somewhat taboo area, hasn't been broken yet. So it's probably another area we'll move into.
Yeah, great. Okay, that'd be interesting. It'd be interesting, the ethical challenges around researching around that. But it is really important, fulfilling part of life, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Can I just come back to what you mentioned about somebody's talk on discomfort? That was Robert.
This was Diener. So yeah, he's the son of Ed Diener.
Okay.
He's one of the leaders in positive psychology. Very good TED talk.
Great. Okay, I'll invite people to Google that and look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, he actually gave it at the Happiness and Its Causes conference last year in Sydney.
Okay, excellent. Oh, great. And so tell me about the importance of play, because that is something that I really believe in and just think is so important. And I feel like we've lost that a lot from, as children, we naturally just play. And because of social norming, we've lost a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, well, if you Google AUT plus state of play plus Purcell,
Purcell as in
the clothing detergent. Yeah. So our labs recently put out a report by Dr. Scott Duncan called The State of Play, where they sponsored some research where we could go out and get some good norms around how much kids and so forth play in New Zealand. So it's the first report of its kind. But yeah, just the idea of play itself. Children are really good and natural at it, and as they sort of go through the school system, it's kind of drummed out of them a little bit with all the rules and regulations and everything. And then when they get to the work environment, adults at work are terrible at play.
Yeah.
So it's one opportunity. It's a big opportunity to increase well-being, where we've previously had a skill that's been not naturally, but almost selectively quelled through the structures that are imposed. So the opportunities for play aren't there in a work environment, for example. So I do things like go into office environments and get people to play. So, make paper planes and we throw them at things. And I sort of find that, probably about 80% of people really like it, but you still get 20% of people that it's just too unnatural and too uncomfortable because they're just not used to it.
So how do we overcome that? Because I think that is the thing, people will feel silly. And they'll perceive that they'll feel silly and uncomfortable. How do we get past that?
Well, there's an underlying aspect of vulnerability here. You've got to address that first. So I think there's some easy ways to overcome it, which is just providing opportunities, which will work for a lot of people. But then there's some deeper seated things of allowing people to play in their different ways and in different circumstances. So it's not the case that you can take, a team in an office environment and just easily get them all to play. But again, there's just very little research in this area. There's a couple of good books, but in regards to research studies looking at as an intervention, there's just very, very few. So I guess part of the question is we don't really know the right ways just yet, and there's not a lot on it. But I think we're at the state where we know it's very valuable, especially evolutionarily. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And you mentioned positive parenting as another key area, and there's probably a lot of parents listening in. So what would be some advice you'd give to parents, perhaps around how they can improve their wellbeing, their parenting, and help instill that in their children?
Well, at the moment, I'm really excited because Professor Lee Waters at the University of Melbourne, who heads their positive psychology centres, just about finished a book on positive parenting, which will be the first of its kind. So I don't know exactly when it's coming out. I think later in this year, but I know actually probably that's the best resources. Google.
What was the name? Sorry.
Professor Lee Waters.
Okay.
I'd probably just Google her name, and you'll probably find some talks online of her talking about it. But there are a couple of other people trying to work in the space. It's not something I've done any work around. So what would my advice be to parents? Being a parent of a 4-year-old myself. Well, I guess one of the things I've really enjoyed in being a parent is playing with my child. We play every day. So I guess I savor those experiences. What else would I say? I'm not sure anything in particular springs to mind. But I certainly take time to connect with my daughter. So as soon as she walks in the door at home, I down tools, turn the phone off, and we spend quality time together. I think it's really easy to be distracted by trying to do too many things at once.
Yes.
But I make sure we at least spend some quality time connecting. Like my parenting philosophy, which I pinched off another person, is love them, keep them safe, and teach them stuff. And I think most of the things can come down to one of those three things.
Yeah,
so I found that so true. So I sort of, focus on teaching her things. So, we've just mastered legs out, legs in when she's on the swings, and we've just taken the training wheels off her bike, and it's little things like licking around an ice cream so it doesn't drip. And
and I guess that's another thing you can combine, can't you? Because you're spending time with them, having quality time, keeping them safe, and teaching them things, and just speaking positive words over them.
Yeah, actually,
at the same time.
Actually, I think one of the most beneficial things is looking at aspects of what's called the second wave of positive psychology, or looking at how the negatives can improve your well-being. So it's not just focusing on the positives in parenting, but it's focusing on the negatives. So for example, when she has an accident, I won't just sort of cajole her and cuddle her. I'll just say, it's completely okay to feel sad. It's if I'd hit my toe like that, I'd feel sad too. So it's not trying to just make them feel happy. It's to teach them a range of emotions and how they can handle them.
Yeah, because I guess that ties into what you're saying about discomfort, because we do have such a range of emotions, and in my experience with coaching people, often people have just repressed or pushed away what they see as bad emotions. And so it's right from our children, like I do the same thing with my daughter, is just, she's upset about something, is just to say, I can see you're feeling really upset. How did that make you feel? And just give her a chance to verbalize and experience how she's feeling and express it.
Yeah.
Because as adults, we need to be able to express it rather than push it away, don't we?
Yeah. And it could be a step further than that too. Like those experiences are very functional. So it's kind of not just acknowledging it, but what can you do with it? How can you hone that how can you grow through that experience? That's kind of the question.
So what do you learn from it? And great. It's such an interesting world, the world of parenting, isn't it? Once you get started, it's
I think the other thing is to not beat yourself up about it. That's this other idea of failure, which I think is another one. So I think our school system is naturally set up to quell rather than encourage failure. As a parent and as a supervisor in my students, I'm always trying to look for opportunities to encourage them to fail and push. And if they're not failing, then they're not learning.
Yes.
You've just got to manage that risk and do it appropriately. So
it's great, because we all learn so much through failure, don't we? And but yet fear of failure is such a big fear that holds people back in life. So I love that if we can teach our children that it's okay to fail, and think how much we learn through doing that.
It comes back to vulnerability. Like just thinking about when was the last time you apologized. I apologized yesterday, for example, but I think most people they're not happy admitting when they're wrong or changing track. And I think that psychological flexibility aspect is really, really lacking both in kids and adults. So I think we need to kind of get over the ego, macho, cultural norms, and if you want to grow and thrive, I think.
Yeah, great. And I think another thing that's great for our parenting and for ourselves is that whole area of slowness, of slowing down and taking time and single tasking rather than multitasking. Do you want to share anything else around slowness and the importance of that?
Yeah, well, the guy who wrote the book on this, Carl Horner, he wrote a book called In Praise of Slowness. He's actually got a TED talk on it now as well, which is ironic because he speaks 100 miles an hour. But I'd put it in one of my top 10 books that's had an influence on my life. So I noticed for me when I'm getting a bit overwhelmed that just walking a little bit slower, eating my food a little bit slower can have a big impact. It's one of those strategies and interventions which is really applicable to life.
Yeah.
So I've gained a lot of benefit, and there's all sorts of slow movements now. There's slow food, slow sex, there's slow everything. So I think although again, there's not a lot of hard empirical evidence around this, but I personally found a lot of value in it.
Yeah, slowing down and savouring things. There's a great book, and I can't recall the author's name, but I'll add all these names and links down the message below. But there's a great book called Don't Just Do Something, Sit There. I can't recall who the author is. But, the common saying is don't just sit there, do something. That's the pressure mentality that we often have. And this author, he experienced chronic fatigue, and he found different ways through just slowing down and also just being mindful if he was going to go to a big event, say, and be networking with a lot of people. Beforehand, he would just spend 5 or 10 minutes just in silence or just chilling out so that he was mentally and physically and emotionally ready to go into that more high energy time. Yeah.
I think in a lot of these situations, our brains as humans are really the bottleneck for consuming. We're not built for today's world to consume such vast amounts of information flow. So, the story that I heard was of the paramedic that is, as soon as she got out of the ambulance at the crash scene kind of thing, the first thing she did was tie her shoelaces, regardless of whether they need tying. But the point wasn't to tie her shoelaces, it was really just to slow down, look around, take in the environment, assess things. It's rather than just sort of rush off. There's just one example, but
Right. So it's building in those ways to slow down. And like you said, being disciplined about as soon as your kids get home or your partner gets home, turning everything off, putting your phone away and just spending some time. That has such an impact on relationships, doesn't it?
Yeah. One technique I pinched off Justin Robinson at the Geelong Grammar School in Australia that I've had a lot of success with personally, and when I've asked other people to try it, is what I call the Geelong 3 breaths technique. So what I get people to do is take 3 breaths, this is an example of an intervention that you can implement in your daily life, whether you're sort of waiting at the lights or anything. But anyway, the first breath is a centering on your physical body. So you take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, you try and relax your body and focus on aspects of tension and let it go. The second breath, as you breathe out, you focus on what you're grateful for right now. So not in the past or the future, but wherever you are, what are you grateful for right now? And it could be who you're with or what you're doing or those sorts of things. And the third breath is about what kind of intentional state you want your mind to be in for your upcoming experience. So right now I would like to be, and then insert the blank, I want to be open-minded, I want to be curious, I want to be critical. It's just by taking 3 breaths, which takes about 20 seconds, you become more relaxed, you get a bit of gratitude, and then you prime yourself for your experience. So I think that's an example of, we're using different types of knowledge from positive psychology and we're making it practical in the real world. Another tool that you can just sort of whiz out when you need it.
I love that.
Similar to just sitting there, but you're getting a little bit more benefit.
Yes, that's great. And I love that because, if you say to someone, hey, just sit there and be quiet or be present, it's not so useful as saying 3 breaths. So it's the 3 breaths.
Well, it's a bit like that study I mentioned before. People don't like to just sit there for too long. Exactly. Like in that study, I think it was to be with their thoughts for 15 minutes. And,
That's a long time. Yeah, so it's taking 3 breaths. One, letting go of everything physically, thinking about tension in your body. The second one, thinking what you're thankful for right now in this moment. And the third one, thinking about how you want your mental state to be for now. Yeah, that's fantastic. I like that. It's a good practical one.
Well, Justin Robinson from the Graduate School of Education, pinched it off him. So
right. Yeah. Okay, that's the Geelong 3 breaths technique. I like it. Great. And the last thing I'd like to ask you about, you just mentioned the word then as well, which is one thing that I love sharing on. I think it's so transformational, is gratitude. Just the power of gratitude to shift our thoughts and then, change our lives, really. Do you want to share a little around your thoughts on gratitude?
I'd say as an academic, this is an area that I haven't really done too much in.
Okay.
But I can say, it's the most researched intervention. Like when I look at all the positive psychology interventions that we've researched to date, that probably has the most empirical support. But there's still a lot of caveats around it. Like the longest we know its impact is only a year. So I don't think we can go out and say this is the ground-changing wellbeing intervention will change your life, because really we only know the impact of it up to 1 year. There are a couple of studies which have gone longer, but they kind of need replication. So most of these studies are really, they do the intervention and they follow people for up to 3 months, 6 months, and a couple have gone more up to a year. So we're still really trying to figure out how long it lasts and how well it can be embedded. I'm just trying to think of the guy's name in the States. No, I'm not going to be able to remember it, but he's written a really good book about gratitude for kids, which has been really, really popular as well.
Okay. Great, yeah. So what you're saying is essentially there's so many different aspects we do need to put these together. It's not just focusing on gratitude. It's not just focusing on play. I like strategically being lazy. That's something my husband will like, I think. I'm not very good at that. So it's perhaps thinking what's going on for us and what are our challenges and and what are the different approaches that we can individually take that will personally help us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to, again, that most of these things aren't an either or, but there's really a spectrum of gratitude, the spectrum of laziness, when it's most, I think a lot of what positive psychology hasn't really realized to date is the extent to which these contextual aspects matter and all of this. So, and that's kind of where we're at now. So it's kind of the right tool at the right time for the right person in the right situation. These kinds of questions are more important.
Great. Excellent. And so is there anything else that you'd recommend people do in terms of starting to identify their values, or if they're wanting to make a change right now to boost their well-being? What would be, just to wrap up, where you'd encourage people to start?
Well, I guess the first place to start is with a commitment to well-being. So the number one thing that I think is almost certain is that improving your well-being takes time and effort. It's much like losing weight. The one gym session or the one healthy meal won't make a huge impact, although it is a good step in the right direction. But really, improving your well-being is a commitment of time and effort over the longer term. So it's a good place to start. Beyond that, I think gathering your own personal data. So doing some wellbeing assessments. There's plenty of tools available to track your wellbeing over time, so you can figure out what's working for you and what's not. It's also another good place to start. So a freely available tools to tool I made with a bunch of people called workonwellbeing.com. So sign up, create an account, and evaluate and track your wellbeing over time, and you can sort of that's another good place to start. So beyond that, it's the individual level tools and techniques, and I just encourage people to. Actually, some of the research is showing people are really quite accurate in predicting what tools and techniques will work for them if you sort of explain to them up front. So
I think that's the thing, is that often people have their own answers. It's just a case of choosing that you're actually important enough to put yourself first sometimes. And that's kind of the underlying issues, I guess, in terms of how we value ourselves, whether we actually think we deserve to be well and to be healthy and happy. So working on that first of all, and realizing that if you take care of yourself, you're going to be a better mother, father,
and it's not a here are the 12 easy steps. There are no 12 steps, and there are no easy steps either. It's just a matter of chipping away, trying stuff out, putting some time and effort in, and over time that'll increase your well-being. So there's no easy road to it, really.
Yeah. And perhaps taking the expectations off yourself as well, and just going easy on yourself as you figure it out. Yeah. Great. Oh, well, thank you so much, Aaron. It's really interesting. I can just, hear the years of knowledge that you have, and it's great knowing that you're looking into new areas of research to be able to help, confirm what are the best techniques and ways to do things. And
and we really are just at the tip of this iceberg. Like, we've only just started. There's not much I'd say we know for sure yet. Although there are probably a few things that are good solid bets. Like the impacts of social connections are really important for well-being. Having a sense of meaning is really important. But the rest of it, we still need a lot of replication. We still need a lot of better studies, and with different participants and different types of research design, all this kind of thing. So I think we've got some good ideas which seem to have fruit, but we're a long way off having any kind of absolute clarity around this. So it's an exciting time.
You're a little unwell yourself, so really appreciate your time, and encourage people to go and check out that waystowellbeing.com. Is that right?
Work on Wellbeing.
Oh, Work on Wellbeing. I had it as WOW. Yeah. So workonwellbeing.com. You can do the assessment tool there and find out a bit more. So that'd be great. Wonderful. Okay. So I'll put some links down below as well, because we mentioned a whole lot of different people and resources. So I'll aim to get the links down below so you can check those out and follow through, and wish you all the best in your wellbeing journey. All right. Thanks so much, Aaron. We'll see you later.
Pleasure.